Hello, thank you so much for being here. Today I'm sharing some fun and easy mixed media techniques for winter cards using really minimal supplies. I'll show you how to create a gorgeous layered background with watercolor, ink blending, and a touch of sparkle. It is the perfect backdrop for this silly stamp by Unity Stamp Company, and we'll add a little secret surprise action at the end. Stick around and assemble this card with me. I'm going to work on my background first because it does need some dry time, and I'm using Distress inks for my background. You could use your favorite water reactive inks as well. This is tumbled glass, and I'm just applying the ink directly to the paper. The paper I'm using is super smooth. It is Bristol Smooth cardstock, which can handle a good amount of water. So you'll want to use a watercolor paper for sure, and then just make sure it's smooth. Otherwise, you'll get a lot of texture in your background, which is not a bad thing. It's just not the look that I was going for. So if you want a smooth surface, just make sure you're using the smooth side of your watercolor paper. After I directly applied that ink to my paper, I took a paintbrush and some water and I just smoothed it out. So I got that watercolor look really easily just by applying the ink to the paper and then using water to spread it out so I get a nice rich coverage of ink. Next, I moved on to Broken China for the center, and then for the top, I'm using Uncharted Mariner. This is just an easy peasy mixed media technique to get that watercolor look and almost an ombre effect using water reactive inks. This is the base of our mixed media background. I'm going to dry it really well with a heat tool quickly because I want to do some layering on top. You could set it aside and let it dry naturally, but I'm just kind of in a hurry. So I dried that with my heat tool, grabbed this really cute snowflake stencil from scrapbook.com, laid that over my background, and then I'm going to use my same inks and ink blend over the top. Now, instead of using the tumble glass over my tumble glass background, I'm going to go a shade deeper and use Broken China over the bottom of that light color of tumble glass in the watercolor background. That will really help them pop while still using the same colors that we used in the background. And then for the middle, I'll be using that Uncharted Mariner. Again, just that deeper blue is going to pop against that lighter background behind it. And I'm not being too careful with staying within my ombre bands of that watercolor background. It can overlap a little bit. It'll look fine. It'll kind of blend in, but still pop against that background. And it kind of repeats that idea of having ombre snowflakes over the ombre background, which looks pretty cool. And for the top snowflakes, I'm going to be using black soot. And then whatever's left on my brush, I just kind of lightly went over each of those snowflakes so they kind of had a little bit of a deeper color of those blues. So our second mixed media technique was just ink blending through a stencil over our background. Now I am going to clean off my brushes since I have my baby wipe out, and then I'm going to clean off my stencil. I'm just doing a very light wipe to get the ink off the stencil itself. I don't want to wipe away the ink from the actual card front. For our last technique, I grabbed some Frostbite Astro Paste for some shimmer and shine to our next layer of mixed media for this background. And the reason why I wiped off that ink is because I don't want to get that ink inside my pot of Astro Paste. And that blue is going to be picked up from my scraper here, and I don't want to put that back into my pot of glitter paste. I'm just making sure that each of my snowflakes has a good amount of that paste inside the cutout. And then when I'm done, I take my spatula and I just scrape it down to make sure it's a thin layer. That way it'll dry quicker. And here you can see how it picked up that blue, so I don't want to put that back into my pot, which will make my, crystal clear glitter blue. We want to keep that nice and clean. So I'm just going to remove this stencil so we can see what the Astro Paste looks like. Kind of has a cloudiness to it. I'm going to set it aside and let it dry and naturally let it do its thing. And it'll eventually dry clear, so you have this cool kind of clear glittery effect over top those snowflakes. And once I'm done, I always clean my stencil and my work area right away so that glitter paste doesn't stick to everything. Next up, let's work on our funny little chicken. I love this stamp set from Unity Stamp Company. It's called Fly This Coop, and this chicken is done with winter and it's ready to get out of here. I just love his crazy, funny expression. I stamped him on some more Bristol smooth cardstock using some watercolor friendly ink because I am watercoloring him. If you're not interested in the watercoloring process, go ahead and skip to the 8-minute 36-second mark. That's where I start putting everything together for the final assembly. For watercoloring this chicken, I grabbed my Distress watercolor pencils. I love these. They're so easy to use. They do have a bit of a cloudiness to them that's kind of reminiscent of the oxides, the Distress oxides, so they're not like a crisp clear watercolor like when I watercolor with the distress inks themselves, but I just find these pencils just simple to pick up and use with my water brush that I reach for them over and over again. So they're just fun to use. When I watercolor with the watercolor pencils, I like to lay down a color first if it's a wide area, and then use my water brush to kind of spread it out to melt it and fill in that area. And then I'll come in and pick it up directly from the pencil itself. And I just use the water that's in the brush. It's usually more than enough. I don't squeeze the pen too often unless I really want to pick up a lot of water and dilute that pigment. So I'll just take my pen and rub it over the end of the pencil, get a good amount of pigment depending on the color. Sometimes I'll do more or less depending on how vibrant I want it to be. And then I'll just apply it to the paper. I like to do this in layers so it can dry, and then I can always come back over it later to really bump up the color and vibrancy. So if you give it a little bit of time between those layers, you'll see how much it'll soak into the paper and mute the color. I also have a baby wipe to the side of my work area. I'll clean off my brush in between the colors, or if I get too much pigment on my brush, I can wipe a little bit off. I can also wipe off that color and then add a little bit of water to the area if I got too much ink, and then it'll lift up some of that ink as well. So those are my basic tools. I always have a baby wipe to clean off my brush, a water brush filled with water, and then my pencil in my hand. And I just go through all the layers, taking my time, not rushing this process, and just having fun coloring it. I'll have all the colors that I've used for watercoloring on my blog at dahlhouse-designs.com if you're looking for the specific colors that I used. And I'm just finally adding a little bit of shading at the end to finish off the watercoloring. And then I did fussy cut him out, but there is a coordinating die available for him now. Mine just didn't arrive in time for this video. If I had been thinking, I would have left my bird set up in my Misty and I could have restamped with that black ink. So instead I took a black pen to kind of brighten up his eyes, nose, and wobblers. I don't know what you call those. And then a little bit of white pen for highlights. And now we just need to assemble. Here's a look at that background, nice and dry. I love that bit of shimmer. It's kind of like a cross between clear embossing with shine. I just really like the effect, and you can feel the texture as well. So this crazy looking chicken looked really frazzled, so I thought it'd be fun to put him on an action wobble. So I'm just removing the sticky part to that wobbler and then applying him to the middle of my card front, leaving a little bit of room below for my sentiment, which I stamped and then die cut with the scalloped and stitched sentiment dies and then put it right below. So fun! And here's a final look at the card. I love how the sparkly snowflakes and inky background make the perfect setting for this wobbly, frazzled chicken. It's simple, fun, and sure to bring a smile. All the supplies I used are listed in the description of this video or on my blog at dahlhouse-designs.com. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to check out my other videos for more card making inspiration, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.